A man cannot enter the store due to his color and appearance, but everyone regrets it when they see that he was with him. Hello, welcome, like, subscribe and turn on notifications. Renato, I was going to buy milk at the supermarket. His sister had not eaten well for days. He lived in the countryside, but the place was growing and houses, and some stores were being created. He and his family lived from what they grew and sold, but the money was not always enough. He went to the first supermarket in town with the little money he had saved. It was not much, but his sister would be happy. He was dazzled by the size of the place. Renato had only seen the place so big on television. As he entered the supermarket, a security guard didn't take his eyes off Renato, but he was dazzled by the place, didn't even realize he was being followed. He looked for some minutes to the dairy section, but he couldn't find it, so he asked a girl who was close to him for help. Excuse me, do you know where it is? Can I find a can of milk? Renato asked. The woman politely replied, and Renato walked, but the security guard he stopped. Get out of here now, boy, do not disturb customers asking them for food. The security guard said, I wasn't ordering food, I just asked that woman where I could find latte, said Renato, scared with a threatening look from the security guard. Even so, the security guard took him out of the place, and Renato, scared, he couldn't do anything. Unfortunately, it wasn't the first time something like that happened to him. Renato started to swim sadly. He went to a grocery store. He always went there. It was more expensive, but at least he was treated in a dignified manner by the owner of the establishment. At the grocery store, Renato bought a can of milk. However, there was 50 cents left to close the bill, and even so the woman let him take it. Renato felt happy. Although there were people, but in this world there were also good people. When he was leaving the place, a person caught his attention. A woman came in well dressed, jewelry and high heels. She was stunning. Renato never saw anyone how nobility burns so great. The woman walked through the grocery store and bought just a few things and left. On her way home, Renato couldn't get that woman out of his head, and the clothes she was wearing looked like a model. At home, he made porridge with milk that he bought for his sister. After that, he went to the field to weed to be able to do the next harvest. Renato lived in a small house in the countryside with his sister and mother. The house was not theirs. The owner of the land let his family live there and gave a part of the field so that Renato could plant for his own consumption or to sell. The owner of the land was the kind gentleman, but who rarely went out or spoke to other people. He preferred to stay at home or look after the cattle. Renato started weeding, and shortly after his shovel broke, he went to the landlord's house to borrow another. Father then knocked on his door, but he was startled by the person who answered. It was the same woman he had seen at the mercantile. This time she was wearing simpler clothes, but she was as pretty as before. Sorry, I wanted to talk to Mr. Almost stuttering, he left, but he told me before leaving that he could let you in to get the tools you needed, said the girl with a soft tone of voice. Renato came in a little shy and took the shovel. Even with embarrassment, he asked that she was the woman. She sighed and said, I'm Carlos's granddaughter, and I'm here. Thanks for coming here, but I don't intend to stay too long. Renato can see from the woman's tone of voice and facial expressions that she didn't like being there at all. The two said goodbye. A few days passed and Renato he never saw the young and beautiful woman in the field again. He thought that she had already gone back to wherever she was because it was clear that she did not belong there. Renato was working in the fields again. He was tired, but he had to finish his work. When he looks at the horizon, he sees the same young woman walking through the fields. Despite it was a beautiful day, the girl's eyes were filled with sadness. It was also visible that she had been crying for some time, but the tears were carried away by the wind and sun. She went towards her and asked an unusual question. Do you know if there is any place that sells ice cream here nearby? Renato, caught by surprise, thought for a long time until he remembered the new supermarket that opened. I know a place that might have it, just don't get that far. Tired, but had to finish his work when he looks To the horizon, he sees the same young woman walking across the fields. Although it was a beautiful day, the girl's eyes were sad. It was also visible that she had been crying for some time, but the tears had been washed away by the wind and sun. She went towards him and asked an unusual question. Do you know if there is any place that sells ice cream nearby? Gets so tired, but had to finish his work. When he looks to the horizon, he sees the same young woman walking across the fields. Although it was a beautiful day, the girl's eyes were sad. It was also visible that she had been crying for some time, but the tears had been washed away by the wind and sun. She went towards him and asked an unusual question. Do you know if there is any place that sells ice cream nearby? Gets so direction and asked an unusual question. Do you know if there is a place that sells ice cream nearby? Renato, taken by surprise, thought for a long time until he remembered the new supermarket that opened. I know a place that might have it, but it's not. Asked direction and asked an unusual question. Do you know if there is a place that sells ice cream nearby? Renato, taken by surprise, thought for a long time until he remembered the new supermarket that opened. I know a place that might have it, but it's not as close, but you can go there by bike. I'm not used to walking a lot, and I don't know how to ride a bike, said the woman. If you want, I can take you there. I know how to ride a bike. She didn't say anything, and just shook her head, saying that accepted. Thank you, sorry for my lack of politeness for not introducing me. My name is Sofia. Renato and Sofia went to Seu Carlos' house and asked to borrow his bike. Sofia was scared to get on the bike and be guided by Renato, but he was very patient. 5 minutes later, she was smiling. Sofia said it was a good feeling, and even better than riding a car. Renato then he said he had never been in a car in his life, and that impressed Sofia. The two were really from different worlds. A few minutes later, they arrived at the supermarket they went to. The cold section. They found ice cream that she wanted so much. While the two were in line at the supermarket talking happily, the same security guard who kicked Renato out the other time showed up. This man is bothering you, the lady said. Security in a harsh voice. Of course not, he is my friend. Because he would be bothering you? Sofia then spoke in surprise. The security guard didn't say anything else and just walked away. Renato was embarrassed, and Sofia realized that after that he was quieter. As they went back home, Sofia asked why the security guard had asked that. Renato explained what happened last time and what has already happened to him several other times. Sofia was speechless. She was welcomed with open doors everywhere she entered. Already with Renato, some people were wary of him just because of his color. This made Sofia feel indignant. It was the first once she witnessed something like this. When they arrived, Renato was already saying goodbye when Sofia said, do you want to have ice cream with me? It's a very big pot, and I don't want to get fat. Renato accepted, and the two went into Seu Carlos' house, who was in the living room watching television. Sofia and Renato stayed talking for a long time until the ice cream ran out again. She was impressed. It was Renato's first time eating ice cream. In the days that followed, Sofia prepared several different foods, like pizza, lasagna, stroganoff, and pie. She always called Renato, and the two stayed talking for hours. One day Renato found out that opening a movie theater that would be an hour away from where he lived. Excited, he went to Sofia to invite her to watch a movie together. It would be the first time he would go to the movies, and he was very excited. When he left the house, Renato saw from a distance 2 cars. Both were luxury cars, and he didn't know who belonged. Sofia was outside the house talking to 2 men. He was no older, and the other must have been his age. Despite being far away, Renato could see it was a conversation. Serious, and that's why. Suddenly approached the older man, got into one of the cars, and the other tried to hug Sofia, but she pulled away from him, so he also got into the car with an older man, and they got out of there, leaving one of the cars. Sofia sat down and was thoughtful. Renato sat down, approached, and asked if everything was okay. She told him to sit down and said that he needed to vent. Sofia, so he said, those were my father and my brother. They came to convince me to come home and to try to Bring my car back. Renato was confused the first time they spoke. She said she wouldn't stay there for long, Sophia, so she continued talking. My grandfather, you call SCU Carlos, when he was younger, he became a millionaire and had a big company, but out of nowhere, he left everything and came to live here in the countryside. Your son, who was my father, got everything and managed to get even richer since then. My father raised me and my brother for us to follow his path, but I didn't want that, to be honest. I didn't like the job I had at my father's company, despite earning very well, but I spent too much. I went out with my friends, I enjoyed life, and I missed a lot at the office. When my father found out, he was furious, and my brother supported him in everything. Both of them took me out of my job and almost all the money I had and sent me to celebrate with my grandfather. At first I hated it, leaving here soon, but now, I don't know, something makes me feel good here, a peace that I never felt. My father and my brother thought I was going to give up soon, and they were surprised that I hadn't come back. It's been a few days since the two called me for me to come back, but I always deny it, so they brought my car back so that I taste the richness again. Wanting to leave when she finished talking, Sophia seemed calmer. She called Renato to get in the car. He was impressed. The seats were more comfortable than what he imagined was his first time getting into a car. Renato wanted to call her to the cinema, but now seeing how Sophia's life was, he got pensive. He knew he was in love with her, but he could never give her any of that, so he gave up. Sophia, however, said that she heard that a movie theater had opened and called him, surprised. Renato accepted it with a smile on his face. Sophia went to Renato's house and invited her mother and sister to go too. Together, Sophia also saw Renato's house for the first time from the inside. It was a very humble place, and what hurt her most to see was the empty fridge. She became thoughtful. She was in love with Renato, and that's why she didn't return to the company, but in case she didn't come back, as she would give a dignified life for him. Trying to forget these thoughts, they all went together in Sophia's car to the cinema. Renato and his family were delighted. It was their first time at the cinema. Sophia was happy to be able to help them. Having a happier day after the movie ended, everyone came back and Renato thanked them for the day. While he was lying down, Renato thought about the love he felt for her, but he couldn't give her the life she deserved. While he was lying down, Sophia thought about the love she felt for him, but if he stayed, couldn't help him have a better life. The next day, Sophia told her grandfather, and Renato wanted to go back to the company. His grandfather was quiet, and Renato felt a lump in his throat, wanting to swallow the tears, so she said she wanted to take Renato for a few days to he knew the big city. Asked his grandfather that Renato's mother and his sister stay with him while the two were away, so that they and he wouldn't be alone. His grandfather said there were no problems, and Renato was perplexed, but clearly accepted. The two entered, and they left. Sophia had called her father and told that he was going to come back. He immediately released all her cards, and now she could spend it. How to do it? Before, on the first day, she took Renato to see different places. While they looked at each other, the attraction between the two was very strong, so the two kissed. The following days were the happier than Renato and Sophia had ever experienced, but the calm didn't last long. Renato would have to go back to his house, and he couldn't stay with Sophia where she was. But the biggest problem came after Sophia introduced Renato to her father, and they had experienced. But the calm didn't last long. Renato would have to go back to his house, and he couldn't stay with Sophia where she was. But the biggest problem came after Sophia introduced Renato to her father, and they had experienced. But the calm didn't last long. Renato would have to go back to his house, and he couldn't stay with Sophia where she was. But the biggest problem came after Sophia introduced Renato to her father, and brother. The two were polite and treated Renato very well. However, days later, Sophia's father called saying that that man was not good for her and that there were several other better candidates than him. Sophia got irritated and said that he couldn't send her every area of her life. Her father then said that he would take everything from her again if she didn't let go of him. A daughter and not like an object. Sophia told everything to Renato and said she was tired of living like this. He felt guilty for causing this to her. Sophia got irritated with him and said he wasn't to blame for anything she didn't like that he thought that was causing of problems, the other people who had serious problems. He not for her. Renato was perfect. The two hugged and bought a bus ticket to go back to the field. After a month Renato went back to his family, who missed him. Life went on as usual. Sophia was even helping Renato in the fields, but sometimes she looked away and a little sad. Su Carlos, seeing his granddaughter like that, decided talk to her. He said, Sophia, my dear, few people know why I became a millionaire and gave up everything when I was younger. I met your grandmother. We were happy because we had a lot of money. That's what I thought. We went out everywhere. We ate best restaurants. We can do whatever we want. I was happy at that time, very happy. Then she passed away and my world collapsed. After years of grief, I decided to do what we do together when she was alive. I went out to restaurants, go everywhere. I did what I wanted. But I wasn't happy, so I realized that it wasn't the money that made me happy, it was just her. The money helped us live better times and gave us comfort, but without her none of it was worth it. So I left everything and came to live here. This place always brought me peace and I spent good times with your grandmother here. When you were having ice cream with Renato in the living room, I realized I'm happy. You were now imagine that you had bought that ice cream alone and were eating it alone. You would be happy. I'm sure not. So don't get attached to material goods. The most important thing you have is there weeding that lawn. Sophia cried and finally managed to understand what was important. Renato said, no, I don't think he'll ever do that again. Renato was accompanied by Sophia's best friend. Sophia asked her to help Renato buy a very nice suit for his wedding. Renato and Sophia were engaged. They were happier than ever. The couple started to work together in the fields, and with the help of Su Carlos, the two managed to earn more and even hire an employee. Now Renato could give everything to his mother and sister. Sophia now had a balanced life, where he didn't give too much importance to money and could live freely and happily next to his great love. I hope you enjoyed the story. Like, comment what you think of this story. Does this happen these days? Share with the friends. Thanks for watching.